good. Well, thank you for being here this morning, or almost afternoon, I guess. An exciting session is concluding in Alberta's legislature today. That started with a throne speech in Budget 2022, which theme was, focusing on moving forward, focusing on improving the healthcare system, accelerating Alberta's economic recovery, and improving the life for Alberta families. And this government accomplished that this session. From the Red Deer Hospital expansion to the 100 new EMS units announced just yesterday, this government is responding to the needs of Albertans. At the same time, this government produced Alberta's first balanced budget in a decade, and the economy is back on track, poised to lead the country in growth this year, while attracting massive investment in aerospace, logistics, venture capital, and manufacturing, while positioning Alberta for further investment in hydrogen, tourism, hemp, and film and television. Announcements like the de Havilland manufacturing water bombers near Calgary, the Unity and Pace bringing new offices to Alberta, Inca Renew Tech processing hemp at a new facility in Vegreville, several value-added agriculture processing facilities across rural Alberta, and more film and television series like the 5th season of Fargo. This government also announced a major investment in the Hydrogen Centre of Excellence that will provide a place for Alberta for piloting and commercializing the growing hydrogen industry in our province. It's important to note that through all of this hard work, Alberta has recovered the jobs lost in spring of 2015 under the disastrous reign of Rachel Notley and the NDP. During this session, the government oversaw an ambitious legislative agenda aimed at honoring all of the promises that we made to Albertans when we were elected in 2019. The Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act, which of course celebrated Her Majesty's 70 years of reign by recognizing Albertans who have helped change our province for the better. The Utility Commodity Rebate Act allows for $150 electricity rebates for 2 million households, farms, and small businesses, amounting to nearly $300 million in relief on high electricity bills. The Continuing Care Act, which expands and modernizes continuing care, while Budget 2022 provides funding for more than 1,500 new continuing care beds and added home care capacity in our province. The Education Reform Teacher Profession Discipline Amendment Act, which creates a single, unbiased, fair, accountable process that can be accessed in a timely manner to further protect students and give parents peace of mind. The Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act, which removed barriers to economic growth, like enabling intermunicipal business licenses and increasing the sustainability of rural utilities. The Traffic Safety Amendment Act, which protects all roadside workers by requiring all motorists traveling in the same direction to slow down to 60 kilometers an hour when passing a vehicle with lights flashing. This session also included the passing of important motions, condemning the use of the Emergency Act by the federal government, calling upon the federal government to impose tougher sanctions on the Russian Federation in solidarity with Ukraine and to provide the needed humanitarian support that our country can provide, and calling on the Government of Canada to stop its planned increase of the carbon tax in step with Alberta's elimination of the fuel tax, given that Canadian families are struggling with the highest inflation in 30 years. In closing, I'm proud to say that this government has firmly established Alberta as the best place in the world to work, live, play, start a business, and raise a family. I'd also like to personally thank Premier Jason Kenney for his 30 years of public service and his dedication to uniting the Conservative movement in Alberta on this, his last legislative session day of his time as Premier. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
We'll start with 3 questions from the floor. Please state your outlet and name, and 1 question, 1 follow-up.
Shailan Skalski with CTV News. Thank you for taking my question. Earlier today, the NDP called the last 13 weeks of the session a total failure, plagued with internal infighting. I want to get your response to that claim and also some reassurance that you can offer for Albertans that this isn't a caretaking government that's shutting down session early so they can deal with party politics.
Well, first I'll take the last question first if I could. This definitely is not a caretaking government. The Premier has been clear that his government, Alberta's government, will focus over the coming months on completing the mandate that we are given by Albertans and the remaining platform commitments that we committed to Albertans to completing. As for leaving session early, we have passed unprecedented amount of legislation, 137 bills in 3 years, We had a very significant legislative session. This session alone, I just went through some of the acts that are significant. We also passed a budget in this legislative session. We're past the May long weekend, and frankly have completed more than I anticipated that we would complete this spring. And it's time to get MLAs back to their constituents, particularly as we move out of the COVID era, to spend some time with Albertans to understand what they would like to see from the upcoming fall legislative session, the next direction of government. But Alberta's government will continue to be in the driver's seat, defending Albertans, making sure that we're moving forward with policy that's going to focus on getting Albertans back to work, dealing with things like inflation and issues that are raising the cost of living for Albertans. And again, another example of that will be, I'll be back in Washington in a couple of weeks with Minister Savage, continuing the great work that was done down there last 2 weeks ago, to be able to move forward with strong conversations happening around the use of our energy for national security issues in both the United States and Canada. And you're going to continue to see that level of activity from the government as we also go through a leadership process to elect who will be the next Premier of Alberta.
Yeah, as a follow-up, you touched on how the government is going to continue to fight inflation. I'm wondering if you can give an exact date or a timeline as to when Albertans can expect to receive those utility rebates. And also, as a secondary to that, the Premier hinted earlier this year that if inflation continues to creep up, we're seeing natural gas prices continuing to creep, and the economy continues to chug along, Albertans may be getting more relief. So if you can address that as well.
So Alberta's government, as the Premier said, will take action to help with the cost of living issue, which we see as the most significant issue in the country right now, and for sure in our province. Action has already taken place. I mean, removing the fuel tax, significant action. Work on natural gas rebates and the electricity rebates, other great examples of that, where we have shown that we will react quickly when we see a need, and we'll use policy tools at our disposal to get action to be able to help Albertans. Exactly what may be required in the coming days, we don't know, but Cabinet stands ready to be able to take action, and will quickly. As for when the rebates come into place, it was a long, drawn-out legislative process from the official opposition on that bill, something I was disappointed by, but we have that legislation passed. And my understanding is that you're going to hear more from Minister Savage and Minister Nally in the coming days on when that will finally take place. But I anticipate, and what I've been briefed on, is that Albertans will see this reflected on their bill very shortly.
Hi, Janet French from CBC News. I just wanted to see if you have seen a copy of the Pytel report on the human resources issues within your government. Have you seen a copy of that report? What does it say, and when will the public get to see the recommendations?
I am not aware of that report, and I do not believe I've seen a copy of that report.
Okay.
But likely, the finance department is probably the best spot to start with that. And Paul can try to make sure we follow up with you, Janet, on some more information, but I don't recall being briefed on it.
Okay. I'm also curious about your own leadership ambitions, given now that obviously there'll be much focus on leadership. Do you have any ambitions to be leader of this party? And if so, why? And if not, who would you like to support?
So, as I said to you earlier this week, my focus this week was getting the job done for Albertans in the legislature and completing this session, of which I will do this afternoon. I have never had significant leadership ambitions, at least in the short term. I have young children that I already don't see enough, even as my capacity as a cabinet minister. That said, I'm proud to be one of the founders of the United Conservative Party. I worked hard to bring this party together and to unify our legacy parties. And in the coming days, I will be watching to see if somebody comes forward that I think can keep that coalition united and complete what I think is the most important task, which is putting aside divisive politics, politicians' egos, and instead focusing back on the people of Alberta and being able to put a united Conservative front to defeat Rachel Notley in just over a year. If I don't see somebody come forward that can do that, I will consider whether or not I should take action to do that. But my hope is that we see some leadership contestants come out with that capability, and I'll have more to say about that as this progresses.
Thanks. Minister, my main questions were already asked, but I do have one to follow, and I stand corrected that because I don't think I've ever heard you speak on this, and I think an explanation is deserved. It was a crazy session. Things got a little out of hand. Yeah, but you, sir, you dropped the F-bomb toward the speaker. And then you never apologized for it. You sent somebody else in to do so. So my question is, what happened that day? Why did you handle it that way? And is there anything you want to say in hindsight?
Well, first, you're mistaken, Dean. I did apologize for the F-bomb legislature immediately following that. you're referring to a different procedural process in regards to a point of order debate in which I was out of town negotiating the situation with the Pecani and the headworks in southern Alberta and could not be in the chamber. And my deputy did withdraw those remarks to allow the process of the legislature to move forward. But that withdrawal had nothing to do with my use of certain language inside the chamber. I immediately apologized and withdrew for that comment when I did it. To be clear, I did not swear at the speaker inside the chamber. That's also inaccurate. I was sitting and used an inappropriate word out of frustration for some stuff that was taking place from an opposition member. It's a heated spot inside that legislature. I certainly would never do that on the record or in a speech. And again, as I said in the legislature that day, it was inappropriate language. I apologize and withdraw that remark and was disappointed in myself that I used it inside the chamber. But the reality of our legislative process is sometimes it gets hot in there and emotions get high. But at the same time, that's why we need to apologize, withdraw comments, and move forward in a positive way.
And to follow up on that, yeah, just the tenor of the House. I mean, yeah, as you say, it got pretty intense on both sides. You see, how would you characterize it, and how do you think it's going to be in the fall?
Well, my personal opinion is if you look across the parliamentary system in our country, we have the most aggressive official opposition anywhere in the country, who has never put down their partisan tools and their main tool of personal, aggressive, vicious attacks, which sets the tone in the chamber. And unfortunately, sometimes our caucus has risen to that when we should not have. In general, we've done our best not to rise to that. But it's not a meeting room. It's a legislative process that has existed for a long time, where we're supposed to bring those emotions and debate on behalf of our constituents. And sometimes it gets a little bit hot in there, but I don't think in general that it's ever been that significantly out of control in the Alberta legislature. And, Dean, I would point to how much legislation has been passed in the last 3 years and give credit, frankly, to all parties in the legislature. 137 bills in 3 years is a lot of work that has taken place in the legislature, and we can't do that without all parties usually working well together. So, it's the parliamentary process, and some days are tough in there and some days are not.
Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Tim Birch, CTV.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. I just want to ask about Bill 1. I specifically want to know what the reasoning was behind including the honorable designation in a bill that essentially is there to recognize Alberta's youth. Was that necessary, and why was it necessary?
Well, other provinces do the same process. Saskatchewan and I believe one or two other maritime provinces, and of course both the Mother Parliament and our Parliament in Canada do that process. This is a recognition of those who have served, not just currently, but throughout the history, the 100 and some year history of our legislature, who has served Her Majesty in her 70th year on the throne on Executive Council. And so that was primarily, but we wanted to use that legislation to recognize lots of Albertans from all walks of life. And one of them was to recognize Albertans who have taken the time and dedicated certain portions of their lives to serve on Her Majesty's Executive Council inside this province. And I will point out, you see it in the legislature today. The leader of the official opposition, a former premier of this province, who often in the legislature I will disagree with stuff on, but it's quite an accomplishment what Premier Notley did, becoming the premier of this province and leading her party that way. And it's certainly our view that she should be recognized for that contribution to the throne and to her province going forward.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, I understand all of that. I'm just curious to know about this specific time. I mean, you've mentioned inflation on the call. You've mentioned, balancing the books. Obviously, a lot of people still thinking about the pandemic. So, specifically at this time, why did that have to get done? Why did these titles need to go into this bill right now?
We have the head of state who has served her country in this province for 70 years. Legislatures all across the Commonwealth and parliaments all across the Commonwealth were recognizing her service. That bill was simply to do that and to recognize those who have served with Her Majesty, who has served, frankly, selflessly for 7 decades on the throne. Certainly, Alberta was not going to be the only legislature that did not recognize that contribution. That bill did not take up significant amount of legislative time. And our legislature, again, has been passing legislation at the rate of about, I believe, about one bill every day and a half. So the legislature's done its job, and I thank all the members for doing that, which has allowed us to be able to pass a wide variety of legislation and be able to respond to Albertans' needs in real time.
Operator, can you put through the next caller, please?
Graham Thompson, iPolitics.
Yes, just to follow up on the question of leadership. You said that you're looking, you're going to be watching if someone comes forward that you would like to see take forward. There's speculation or talk now that Travis Taves will be announcing soon a leadership bid. So does Travis Taves fit the bill as far as you're concerned for a good choice to be a leader?
So I'm not going to answer who I may or may not support for leader or whether or not I will make a final decision in this press conference today, but other to reiterate what my objective is for my party is to make sure that we come together, that we stand up to some of the divisive politics that we've seen, frankly, from some of my colleagues and others who would like to come back into politics, and it's to get back focused on the people of Alberta's business. I don't drive up here on Sunday nights, Graham, for anything less than trying to deliver for my community and making sure that my province is better for my kids and for other Albertans' kids and grandkids. And right now I'm going to be looking very closely to see who's best poised to be able to make sure that we can accomplish that goal and get back to working for Albertans. One of the things that has disappointed me the most over the last couple of years is that some of this has become about individuals' egos. And the moment that this becomes about your ego, you should get out of this business and go back into something else. And so we'll see how this goes in the next couple of days. But my view is that we need to make sure we have a united party, keep this coalition together, and defeat the socialists in just over a year.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, follow-up. This is a different topic completely, and this is because we haven't had a chance to ask you about this for months because of the pandemic and there's no news conferences. But story broke this year about Casey Madhu making a telephone call to the police chief, Edmonton police chief, regarding a traffic ticket. I'm sure you're aware of that. And speaking of that, were you aware of this soon after that happened? The event happened last year. And did you have a meeting with colleagues to discuss it?
I did not have a meeting with any colleagues or have been at any meeting with any colleagues prior to that story being in the newspaper that I can recall. Mr. Bennett actually, I think, asked me this at a press conference about a month ago, if I recall, might be slightly off on the dates. And while I may have heard something about a ticket, I mean, people get tickets on the road, so that would not have caused me any great concern. I certainly was unaware of that I can recall about any phone call to the chief of police until I read about it in the media.
We'll go back to the floor.
Hi, thanks. It's Lisa Johnson with the Edmonton Journal. Often the spring sitting stretches into June, so I'm just wondering if you could specifically answer whether you're ending earlier than normal so that ministers who are interested in running for the leadership of the UCP can hit the campaign trail. It's obviously urgent that the party get started with the leadership race. Is that a factor here?
So a couple things. Just, I mean, I always like when we get into procedure and schedule conversations together. I hope I've always been a good parliamentary instructor to the press gallery in my time as House Leader. I've tried. If you look at the history of this chamber, frankly, this government has sat significantly later than a lot of governments in history. I mean, we had an unprecedented summer sitting at one point, and of course, we had challenges to deal with COVID and different breaks that were taking place. But often, I mean, Ralph Klein used to always say, from my understanding to his House Leader, we better be out by the May long weekend. And so we've always been on the later side of sittings. Frankly, I'm out of legislation today. There's two other bills that will remain on the order paper that still need work that I don't think could get done in time. And we would just be sitting here to work on those. That's the condominium bill and Minister Madhu's one on governance. And those would need more time given the pace that we're going at, and I don't see the need to keep the chamber here just for that when I've been assured by the ministers that those could be dealt with in the fall sitting, so they'll sit on the order paper, we'll clean them up. Everything else is passed. Look, I do think it's probably in the best interest of Albertans to get MLAs back. I already thought this, no matter what the results of the Premier's leadership review would be, is that there is a need to get politicians back into the communities this summer after several years of COVID and having good conversations with our constituents and being able to figure out what the path forward is for Alberta. Lastly, I will say to this, I don't think it's that uncommon as you get further into a mandate that there's less and less to do inside the legislature. We're at 90-some% completed on the mandate and on platform commitments. And so you're going to see shorter and shorter sessions as we head towards the red zone.
Follow up?
Sure, yeah, just on that same issue, I mean, you've said that Cabinet stands at the ready at any moment if you need to step up and bring anything forward, especially when it comes to the cost of living and those types of issues. But, I mean, the NDP has been saying for weeks that this party is distracted by it's an internal business. So how much time are you going to be spending on the leadership review and working on your party versus keeping an eye on Cabinet and that work?
Internal politics happen all the time. They've been happening for the last year. They happen in the NDP too. They're just a little better at not showing it sometimes. And we've been able to accomplish a lot while that internal politics has happened. I don't think that's going to change. Again, 137 pieces of legislation have cleared the legislature in 3 years, which is a very large amount. At the same time as 3 global crises were taking place, including COVID, no legislature or our parliament have been able to keep up that pace, and we did. So I think that shows the dedication of all members of the legislature to continue to work on behalf of Albertans. Cabinet is going to continue to move forward with significant movements as needed, and have already shown that in the last couple of months, moving forward very quickly with removing the gas tax, the natural gas rebates, the electricity rebates, and I do suspect, and the Premier has been clear, that there's probably going to have to be some more stuff done. But I don't need the legislature to do that because we've passed the legislation that we would need to do that now, and then so we would need to respond, and I think I know the government will have more to say in the coming days. But, you know, this is, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I think this Cabinet and government have shown that.
Okay. Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Today. So you mentioned we're about 90-ish% through those 375 platform commitments, but you also mentioned that you're going to take this time to go back into the communities, see what Albertans' priorities are. Based on the results of the leadership review and the upcoming leadership race, do you anticipate a change in direction? Are you going to stay the course? What is the fall session going to look like?
Well, I don't think that I will try to predict exactly what the priorities will be of a fall session. There'll be a new Premier when we come into a fall session, and so I think that that will determine some of the conversation that would take place in the planning for that. But let me be clear, our instructions from the current Premier are to complete the platform, and so that's what you're going to see over the next several months. With the hope of, basically almost being at 100% completion as the new leader comes into place. There may be a couple of things that would have to be dealt with in the fall legislation to accomplish that. And then, we'll see where we head coming into the fall. Again, at that point, you're 6-7 months from the fixed election date. I think it's pretty clear that you will, at that stage, see smaller legislative sessions and less legislation being dealt with because the mandate has been completed. One thing I will point out is we also passed the fixed budget date, though, so we will still have to come back and deal with the fixed budget date and accomplish that before the election. So there'll be stuff taking place, but it won't be at the same volume because we'll be starting to prepare a platform and a conversation with Albertans on why we think we deserve to have a chance to regovern.
Follow up?
Yeah, with those 2 bills that are not going to get through, are you going to prorogue? Are you going to?
Again, I think that at the end of the day, the Premier is the one who makes a recommendation to prorogue to her honor. And for me to speak to that today, not knowing who the Premier is, would probably be inappropriate. But both of those legislation where they are being parked as I depart, is, I'll be honest with you, very strategic that they both could survive whether the government chose to prorogue or not.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.